Yeah, so would like to do this very brief introduction of the European Commission approach to transforming higher education and research institutions that will implement these institutional changes in gender equality. So how the Commission is working to make academia and research institutions more equal. So just a historical view of what was planned before was that there was this shift between fixing the women and fixing the institution. We see this in policies and how these gender inequalities in academia were being tackled. So what do we mean with fix the women? So for a long time, the focus was in empowering women and make them the main actors to reach equality. So there was this concept that women need to learn how to be a little like men, how they need to learn, for instance, to be more brave, they need to learn how to make networks, they need to learn many things that they will make them eventually, if they learn all this stuff, equal to men, and we will reach equality, and they will stay longer in academia, and they will reach leadership positions, etc. Which was the problem of this? So it was very nice. I mean, there were a lot of trainings for women and a lot of policies really to empower women. But what was the issue with this is that this approach does not acknowledge the power relationships that obstacle women to arrive to the leadership positions or to stay in academia. Of course, this position also was not acknowledging what we learned last time about intersectionality and the gender plus. So it was not the same to give the training for white European women than, for instance, to Black women working in research institutions, or for me, like someone from South America also. So there, or someone from very social poor context. So this Fix the Women was not really embracing all the power relationships and not taking into account this intersectionality. Also, one issue was that the weight of fighting these inequalities relied again on women. So it was putting them a double burden. So to live with inequalities and also be responsible in a way for them. So this approach changed to fix the institution, where there's an acknowledgement of the power relationships, and there is an acknowledgement that it's not up to women to change. It's also that we need a cultural change and an organic change, so an institutional change. For more than 30 years, the Commission has been doing different policies and different projects to analyze this issue in academia. And for many framework programs, these are the research programs that the Commission do for several years, so that they put a specific focus on different aspects of research. But in many of these framework programs, there were many projects studying and analyzing how to make gender equality in academia, and also about gender equality plans. So in the last framework program in H2020, there were many projects funded working on gender equality plans. And with all this knowledge that was gathered, we also, I mean, the Commission in their analysis of the data showed that there was not big significant change so far. So from this framework program on, that it's called Horizon Europe, the Commission wants to go one step further. And this is why now they said that the gender equality plans must be a condition, a mandatory condition for research institutions and academic institutions to participate in the Horizon Europe program. So if they want to have funding, as you might know, you need a gender equality plan. What the Commission set as mandatory process requirement? This is what you need. Remember to tick the box when you are on the website of the Commission. Is that this gender equality plan needs to be a public document. signed by the authorities of your university, needs to be on the website, and needs to be communicated to all the staff. There should be dedicated resources for gender. This means like hiring people that will work on gender, or some people that are already hired that will dedicate some of their time for doing gender analysis and doing the gender equality plan implementation. But also it could be other funds that will promote gender equality in the institution. There should be data collection and monitoring. This means that the progress of the gender equality plan implementation should be quantified. So there should be a whole process behind the gender equality plan to show its impact at the end, and to monitor. So sex and gender desegregated data should be collected in the measure of possibilities to control that equality is being reached. There should be also training and capacity building regarding gender equality at your institutions. So that means that everyone at your institution should be learning more about gender. These are the basic process requirements, but also the Commission have some recommendations of content areas that you can add to your gender equality plan. So they didn't make this mandatory so far, but they strongly recommend you to have this in your gender equality plan. That means that these are essential factors that they have been identified, and they did this in a very open way, talking with different researchers in gender. They decided and they identified which are the main content areas for a successful GEP. So one is the work-life balance and organizational culture. We will go through them a little afterwards. The other one is gender balance in leadership and decision-making, gender equality in recruitment and career progression, then the integration of gender into the research and teaching, and then gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. So what do we mean by work-life balance and organizational culture? So here are some things to think about and some possible measures. So, for example, the workload allocation, is it balanced between women and men? The department openness to inclusivity, the visibility of women. These are things to think about. For instance, some are the meetings in times that are accessible for people with parental duties or childcare duties. So some possible measures to promote work-life balance is, for instance, parental leave policies, flexible working arrangements, supporting caring responsibilities when people have meetings, conferences, so they have childcare, etc. So then the next one that they recommend is the gender balance in leadership and decision making. So things to think about is how women are represented in decision making at the top level of your organizations and across the different faculties of your organization. Are the faculty directors always men, for instance? Is this changing with time? Because many of people argue about historical reasons that these directors has been appointed many years ago. But in many institutions, you see that even the new ones, the new appointed ones, are still men. What type of barriers exist in ensure that women are represented in these top positions? And what targets could be set to ensure this balance in leadership positions, like choosing quotas, changing how we decide who is the leader, etc. So, okay, here are some possible measures. As I mentioned, with the quotas, making committees, memberships more transparent, ensuring that leadership and decision-making roles are properly recognized, providing support to women that would like to access to these positions, etc. Then the next, the other area that is good to have in your gender equality plan is the gender equality in recruitment and progression. So things to think about is what targets should be set in terms of recruitment for women and progression into senior roles, which inclusive and proactive measures can be implemented to achieve these targets. So here we are thinking about gender equality. So one of the possible measures could be to add gender equality expertise in your recruitment or promotion committees, to know about unconscious bias, even if they are unconscious, but it's always good to be aware of them and try to counteract them. Being aware also of language biases, as I mentioned, it's not all about gender. The approach of the Commission is about what we call gender plus, or the intersectionality of it. Also assessing research quality rather than quantity. So this way of changing how we evaluate researchers also. Then one other area that is important to address is the integrating of the gender dimension into the research and training content. So things to think about is, do funding programs encourage applicants to consider these gender dimensions in their work when they are doing research? Do funding decisions have process for identifying or flagging where gender should be considered? Does monitoring of the program outcomes include the gender dimension? Do strategic or grand challenge research funding objectives include gender dimensions, etc.? So this is for the research funders perspective. Of course, we are on the other side, we are on the research performing organizations. So do the prospective research projects have this gender impact assessment? Are we consider the gender dimension when we are making trainings, or doing the trainings and evaluating these trainings? And of course, if you do the research, to also do a sex and gender disaggregation analysis whenever is possible. Then we have the gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. Things to think about is, what measure does the organization take to combat gender-based violence and sexual harassment? What is the prevalence of this sexual harassment in the organization? Things that we were discussing on the last training. What further steps can be taken to ensure that the organization has clear organization policies on sexual harassment? Again, things that we were discussing on the last training. And possible measures that the Commission suggests is to have a code of conduct that establish and codify the expected behaviors of employees, to report, so to have a policy established for all members of organizations so they can report on sexual harassment issues. Also a policy that sets a clear information about investigation, support to victims, and of course disciplinary measures and prosecution. So these are the main recommended areas that the Commission defined. So the idea is that with this gender equality plan containing all these areas, the idea is that we will eventually lead to institutional changes in our organizations that will arrive to gender equality. Of course, this is not easy. And just to talk a little about institutional changes, because institutional changes themselves are not easy and they take time. So there's a lot of theory about institutional changes in many aspects besides the gender equality. What do we know about institutional change? So which are the features or the characteristics that one institutional change should have to really produce change and to really be successful and sustainable? One of these features is irreversibility. So an institutional change is irreversible because when there are these induced changes, they are so embedded in the institution that they cannot be easily reversed. We know nothing is irreversible fully, but they are very, very hard to be reversed. That means, for instance, a change in budget, for instance, if you add a budget line to do something, that this budget line should be really well embedded in the policy of your organization. Nothing that will depend on the turnover of people, etc. So it's something that should really be on the policies of your organization, and difficult to revert. It should be comprehensive. So what we talk about comprehensiveness is that these changes will span the full organization, not only affecting a few people. So these changes should be cultural and should change also the cognitive attitude of staff and leaders. So in the case of gender equality, it should be a cultural change to avoid sexist attitudes also when you're taking a coffee, so besides your work. So it has to be really like on the daily behaviors, on the practices, on the communication patterns of your institution, but also on the procedures, on the rules, on the standards, on the organizational structure itself. It has to be inclusive. That means that changes will involve all stakeholders of your institution and should be a collective effort. So it means like from leadership to more junior people of your institution. And has to be contextualized. So there, as we mentioned last time, there's not one recipe for a GEP. So even though the Commission, as we saw, it's recommending areas and recommending some policies, there's not one recipe of a GEP that will work for all, because it really depends on your own institution and should be tailored to your own institution. So there are two approaches, two theoretical approaches to institutional change. So there's the top-down or organizational approach. This means that the change starts with the modification of organizational structures. The change starts on the top. We change first the norms and policies and protocols. And this will eventually lead to changing the people, to change the commitment of people, of willing to change their views, behaviors, mindsets, etc. So it's what we call the organizational approach or top-down approach. So it means like there was a decision to make a change at the top level, and all the policies and norms are changed. So eventually will lead to a whole institutional change. And there's the other theoretical approach that we normally call bottom-up. And you will listen a lot these top-down and bottom-up approaches, because we mention it a lot through this type of project. The bottom-up is the social approach. This means the other way around. The change started from the people. People were willing to change their working environment, so they start changing little by little their behaviors, mindset, their organization. They start fighting for things, so eventually they reach the top level, and eventually they manage from their fight and to change the norms and policies of the institution. So it goes really the other way around. This could happen in some institutions, that these work like this and they're successful on doing this. But these are actually the minority of the institutions. Because for having a real institutional change and an effective one, what we need is that these two approaches meet. So it's very hard from the very top level to change things, to change behaviors and actions, and not doing just a tick box and not just, okay, another policy, but then the staff is still keeping on sexist or still sexist comment, or still recruiting very with gender bias in their minds. So, and also doesn't work the other way around. If it's just the people wanted to change something, the bottom up, and it's very hard to get to change protocols and policies and change the minds of the top level. So that's why for effective change, these two should meet. And how do we do? So how can we do institutional change? How can we start? And this is just from the theory of institutional change, what we call grounding actions, but these are any action that are aimed at implementing or favoring institutional change. So every action we do for institutional change should have the same 4 features that I told you before in institutional change. So they should be irreversible, comprehensive, inclusive, and within the context of your organization. So tailored to your organization. One example of grounding actions or actions that we could do on institutional change in gender equality is, for instance, okay, we want to set up information initiatives for university staff. So that's one of the aims of the action, and that could be one part of your gender equality plan, for instance. We want to include the gender dimension in the current training programs. Okay, so we want to change some policies. We will have to talk with certain people, etc. So it's the actions that you want to achieve, but the way to achieve them is to build a roadmap or a plan, like a gender equality plan. And this roadmap of actions is what it's doing is putting these individual actions that we want to do in a strategic framework, so in a time frame. So what will we do first, who we will do it, which is the strategy, to who we will have to engage for each of these actions, when is best. So it's really contextualized into when it's best in your organization, which fights you will decide to fight and which will consume all your energy and do nothing. So all this has to be think about when building a roadmap or a plan for institutional change. And the key features also of being flexible and progressive. So when you do institutional change plan or a roadmap, it's very important of being progressive, so you cannot achieve all change from one year to the another. Institutional change takes time, so you have to do it little by little. And also it has to be flexible because of course you will encounter obstacles, this is normal. So you have to put flexibility, so in case there are unexpected obstacle appears, to be able to still keep on with the plan. So now I will leave the floor to Nathalie.
Thank you, Eugenia.
Thank you.
As I was not there last time for the first training, I would just want to tell you that I'm very pleased to be part of this project. So I'm Nathalie Wuiame. I'm a gender expert now for more than 30 years, and trainer in gender equality. And so I'm really pleased to meet you today online and hopefully next week in person. So thank you, Eugenia, and you will see there are obviously quite a lot of points that already Eugenia mentioned that I will just take over in a perspective of institutional change and gender equality. So the approach, as Eugenia said, was to shift from a fixing movement to fixing the institution. And so that is why one of the strategies from the European Commission is really to talk about institutional organizational change towards gender equality. So gender experts, but also institutional change work has shown that there is really it is really important to focus on the organization culture and really work on it and try to make the adjustment to change and embed the changes in the routines of the organization really deeply, so that you really, as Eugenia said, that you are looking for some irreversible changes, even if it's not always so easy, as we know. So in terms, I think there is a problem with the slides.
Sorry, yeah, I have to.
Okay, I'm still there. Yeah,
there.
I will tell you when to change. Okay, so if we look at the definition from a gender equality perspective of institutional change, taking into consideration that we really start from focusing on the institution and not on women. We are talking about men and women within the organization and the culture. So we have to think about removing the obstacles to gender equality that are inherent to the research system itself or the academic system itself. And so we have really to adapt the practices of the organization. It is really important to take into consideration that these obstacles are not so visible sometimes to gender equality. We are now at what we call a second generation gender bias. So, it's not necessarily overt discrimination against men or women. It's something much more subtle. And we will see that also in how we design GEP, etc., that we need really to look deeply into the different processes and how they interact, and also this intersectionality aspects, and how they create and change a bit the inequalities that you will face, that you will see that women and in some cases men face in the work organization. Next slide, please. So a lot of these key features of institutional change in the gender context have been presented already by Eugenia, but here I present them a bit in a different way. This is also from structural change studies, looking at, because it's already like 7 years, I think, of practices in terms of gender equality, reaching gender equality through institutional change. So there are studies on what are the important aspects of it. So the first one is the participatory aspect, which is not something that is always an acquis in an academic and in a higher education institution. But it's really important there is a space for self-reflection within the organization, because then, and participatory approaches, we also, you will see that we will also propose to you during the different type of trainings to use co-creation techniques, so that you really involve all the people who should be involved in the institutional change process. This is important to be participatory, because then you design meaningful measures. And that is also a bit this top-down and bottom-up. I mean, you are talking with the people within the institution, and so you design the measures really looking deeply at what are the concerns and how you can do this. But also being participatory in the design, it's also being participatory in the implementation. Institutional change needs that everyone is part of it. So it's really important to be participatory during the whole process of implementation of your institutional change, because then you buy people buy and can support the process. Another aspect that is important is to be holistic, and that's again something that Eugenia mentioned. She mentioned comprehensiveness. So being holistic means that you have to cover all crucial issues regarding gender inequalities or gender issues in research, for example. So you have really to try not to left untouched some of these critical issues. It is not necessarily that you can work on them at the same time, on all of them on the same time, but you have to really have a holistic approach, and then you will decide where you start and what you do. So, and also the connecting issues. I mean, there is really obviously important connection between your recruitment process, your promotion process, and then your decision, allocating people to decision-making position, for example. So try to connect issues, and also to connect issues in terms of intersectionality. So different aspects can have a role, and we talk about discrimination ground based on age, on race, etc. So I mean, these are also connecting aspects that can should in fact be addressed. A third aspect is to be inclusive. And here, I mean inclusive in terms of, you know, sometimes it's nice to involve the one you know that will be supporters of your gender equality plans and issues. But in fact, if we want to succeed in institutional change, we have to address the whole diversity of actors, and also the ones that are less favorable. You have to bring them in and try to convince them. That's also something that we will address in other training around, you know, how you deal with resistance, for example. That can be either institutional or also personal. But so really think about being inclusive. It's really important. Intersection of the different institutional patterns. Yes, I mean, this is important, as I said already, that you have a multi-level analysis of your institutional patterns, so that you can really see how gender is combining with other aspects and create, in fact, some types of discrimination. So being very precise in your analysis. Visibility. You have to try to make visible the institutional change, and you start with making visible the commitment. That's why also the Commission is asking that the GEP, for example, is published on the website of an institution. Make it visible that you engage, that you are committed to gender equality. Communicate on the actions that you are taking. Communicate also on, you know, already wins or small wins, even if they are small wins. Communicate on them. So, for example, you have design some material for including gender in your capacity building training or in one type of research. Okay, just publish it, make this visible so that people see what it means really to work on gender equality within your institution. Flexibility. I mean, institutional change is not static. It is continuously evolving, the process as well. So it is really important to be ready to adapt your strategy and also your plan. For example, you can have a gender equality plan that is adopted with leaders, you know, favorable leaders in your institution, and then you have election and you have a change in the leadership, and there are some adaptation to be done because they are apparently less favorable, for example, to gender equality. So be prepared to be flexible. And obviously we have to look for sustainability, so really embedding the structural change in all the organization routines and processes. Next slide, please. Okay, for institutional change for gender equality within the perspective of the European research area, you have to know or remember that in fact in the European research area there are three main objectives regarding gender equality. Is to foster equality in scientific career, to ensure a gender balance in decision-making processes and bodies, and to integrate a gender dimension in research and innovation. And so this is in fact the objective of the institution change reflects these three objectives. So the first one, enhance women's representation and retention at all levels of their scientific career. So that's an important objective on institutional change that is about, you know, scientific career and decision-making process and bodies. And the second one, promote the integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content, which is clearly linked to gender in research content. And what do we mean by gender into the research content? Because you mentioned also at the introduction that you like to think about this in terms of concrete example. If you do a study on engagement and disengagement in sport of young people, for example, but then you integrate gender, because, I mean, we know that there is an issue, in particular disengagement of girls in sport around the age of 12, 13. So you do a study covering the whole population of young people, but you gather statistics by sex and perhaps also other aspects if you can, perhaps then through more qualitative research than quantitative. But we'll go back to that later on, because I will have a session with you on collecting data. But anyway, you do a study on disengagement in sport. It is important that you look at girls and boys and see, because factors can be different in terms of engagement and disengagement. But you also can have a specific gender research on another topic. Can be, you know, what are the pedagogical tools for sport teachers at school to ensure that both girls and boys participate and engage equally in all sport activities, and that they do not reproduce gender norms like, you know, dance is for girls and football is for boys, so that you really work into with teachers in schools about gender issues specifically. Next slide, please. Okay, now one of the key tools for institutional change that the Commission decided to use is the Gender Equality Plan, or GEP. You have all a GEP already, so obviously in that part I will cover some of the aspects that you probably have already done, but I think it's important that we have the general framework of how this is understood at European level, and then that we can discuss how we do it in our own organization. So in the communication of the Commission in 2012 on a reinforced European research area partnership for excellence and growth, the GEP is defined as consisting of a set of action aiming at conducting audits of procedures and practice to identify gender bias, to also have measures and action identifying and implementing innovative strategy to correct any bias, and setting targets and monitoring progress via indicators. This is also something that was clearly indicated in the presentation early on by Eugenia. This is important, obviously, to monitor your progress, evaluate your progress. Next slide, please. So what is important also in terms of understanding what is a GEP? A GEP is a process, and it should really cover and articulate different type of actions and go into a certain degree of complexity. So a GEP is not just, you know, one general objective of, you know, our university is committed, or our higher education institution is committed to fostering gender equality, and we will integrate gender equality in all our process. Okay, that's obviously important to say that, but that's not a GEP. A GEP is something that we should really say, how then do you do this? So while general objectives to foster gender equality are important, this is not a GEP. The same to be mentioned is the fact that sometimes you have broader strategy or plans, like diversity plans or anti-discrimination plan, where gender is just one dimension. And this is not enough for the Commission to be considered as a GEP. The GEP should really, so you can have this, but then based on this broader strategy, then you design a concrete strategy for gender equality in your institution. So, yeah, there is a problem with the slide. Okay. Okay, it's coming. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's animations for each step.
Okay,
Do you want me to go all of them?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize there was an animation. Okay, so there are the main steps of a GEP. There are 6 main steps of a GEP, and as you see it in the design of this slide, it is important to understand that this is a holistic approach, and it is not a fixed one. I mean, so it's not just one process, it's a process that will continue. So the getting started is the first step. Normally you are already, in fact, in step 3 at least. So I will go into the main step in more detail just after that. But so you have 6 steps: getting started, gender analysis, then only you set up your GEP, then you implement your GEP, then you monitor and evaluate your GEP, and then you think about what next. And if you see in this graph, you see that in the what next, you are at a different level. I mean, you are not starting from the same point, obviously. You have learned, you have done some actions already. So you are starting a new cycle of the GEP. So now I will go into the 6 steps a bit more precisely. Next slide, please. So the first one is getting started. So obviously you had already started, but still I think it's important to mention again, and that was also mentioned by Eugenia, the contextualization. It's important to look at your own context in your own organization, your own field of research, of education, in your own country, region, etc. This is important. Context matters, so it is not just about copying and paste a very good GEP that was adopted somewhere else, because it will not necessarily work in your own context. And an important aspect also is to find the support. And that's what we call stakeholder mapping, and we will work on that in Strasbourg. It's really to identify who are all the people that should be involved in your GEP. At different stages of your GEP, you will need some people to support the process. So getting started at that phase already, in fact, you identified all the different stakeholders and see whether, you know, some are more at the core. So we can have a core team, for example, in charge of the GEP, and then you have other people that you will bring in at different phases. So that's the first step. The second step is the analysis and assessing the state of play. So that's important to gather the existing data about staff and students, review existing measures, review relevant legislation and policy adopted in your institution or also perhaps outside of the institution. That is really important. And that is one of the aspects I will talk through with you later on. So I'm not taking too much time about this. We will focus on this step 2 on data collection and analysis of the state of play afterwards. Setting up a gender equality plan. So you have to define objectives. So you can have a broad objective, then you will define specific objective, like I see in my assessment that I have really very few women in certain position in my institution. So what can I do to have more women? And we have also mentioned some type of measures that can be taken. So, I mean, I have to see how I do my process, you know, I mean, in my recruitment of people internally, is it only, do I have formal, transparent criteria, ways to inform about a position that is opened, or do I already have some people in mind that I checked before, you know, and so when the position becomes open, we have already the person we know that will fit that position. That's an example. So you have to really think about what are the measures that you will need to review, in fact, the way you normally do the things, the process you are normally using, and make it transparent, formal, etc. To ensure, for example, in this kind of recruitment promotion, that everyone has equal chance, and also in terms of the criteria you will set up, you have also to be careful in terms of be inclusive. So define objective, define measures that correspond to this objective, define targets within a certain time frame. I mean, this is all about a clear plan, in fact, with who is responsible, what we want to achieve, by when, etc. Then the fourth step is, well, the longest one probably, is the implementation of the gender equality plan. And that is important to really think again about the fact that we are using the GEPs as a tool for institutional change. So really, when implementing the GEP, really embedding the measures in your institutional processes. The fifth step is the monitoring progress and evaluation of the gender equality plan. It is important to monitor the effectiveness of the measures you are taking, and see whether any adjustment is needed. You know, you can there can be some factors that are really blocking some of your measures, or perhaps some resistance, or some processes that are not clear. So you have to adjust you have to adjust the measure that you have taken. But to know that you need, in fact, to monitor the progress. And evaluation obviously is important for sustainability of the actions you are taking, and to be sure that they are really embedded in the process. The sixth steps, it's in fact what comes after. So as I said, I mean, after the first cycle of a GEP, I mean, you start a new cycle, because gender equality is a long process, structural change is a long process, and it's not with just, you know, I don't know, 2 years of a GEP that you will manage it. But it's important that you acknowledge that, you know, for a certain period, you make a choice of certain actions, objectives that you want to reach, and actions, and then, okay, you implement, you monitor, and when that is done, you start a new cycle with other type of measures you will then design, because you will also address other objectives. As we said, we have to be holistic, try to cover the different aspects, but that does not mean that you will do that in one go. In like 2 years, you cannot address everything. You make choices of priorities, and then you develop all along these priorities, and finally you try to address all the crucial issues regarding inequalities. Next step, please. So it is clear that for every GEP, we need to have general and specific objectives based on the analysis done. For each objective, you at least define one measure that should really be conceived as institutional change. So, for example, if I have few women participating in decision making in my organization, saying that I'm training women as manager is one measure.